Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 145 of the It's the Pictures podcast. My name is John Gilpatrick, and joining me, as always, is
Max Colville.
Max. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. We're getting ready for the big game, right? In a few days out.
Yeah. It's really kind of dominating my whole life right now, and I'm glad we're recording this beforehand because I'm going to be pretty apoplectic, I think, either way. I told one of my friends, I'm like, I'm going to be drunk the next day for sure, and it's just a matter of if it's happiness or sadness. But looking forward to that.
Well, why don't you introduce our guest, and then we'll tell him why that is.
Oh, yes. Well, we do have a guest with us today. We're super excited. The great Brian Skutle. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. For those listening who are maybe unfamiliar with you, can you tell everybody a little bit about sort of where you live within the greater online film community?
So my website is www.sonic-cinema.com, and there you will find my written reviews, longer blogs on specific topics, as well as the Sonic Cinema podcast, where I talk about film festivals that I cover, whether I talk about my favorite, the best films of the year. Sometimes I talk about newer films, but also I take deep dives into older films or filmmakers in general. And that's kind of what this podcast has become over the past few years, is kind of a lot of retrospective looking at different filmmakers and different films from movie history. And that's kind of just been the big thing. But you can find that at Sonic Cinema. I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. And those are the two main places to find my work.
Cool. That's awesome. Definitely sounds like what we've been doing here for a while is, especially the pandemic. I feel like, Max, we kind of dove into let's just do episodes on filmmakers. And that was, a nice formula for us. But that sounds awesome. People should check out your work for sure. We are super excited to have you on this episode, and it's a big one for us. We delayed it a little bit for a variety of reasons, some within our control and some not so much, but we are finally getting to our best movies of 2022 episode. We're going to talk about our respective top 10s for the first time, I think, ever, Max. We have a guest for this episode, which is pretty fun. So we're going to do all of our top 10s. We're really going to dive into our top 3s individually and talk about those films in more detail, and just kind of share the 10s through 4 just to keep the episode length a little bit manageable. Hopefully that works for you. If you are dissatisfied with that in any sort of way, I would venture a guess, Max, that we've talked probably about all of the movies that are going to appear on our respective lists over the past year, either in newsletter form or on various episodes of the podcast. So hopefully you can scratch that itch in the archives if you're so inclined. But before we get to all that, there is news still. Even though it's our top 10 of 2022, 2023 has brought us plenty of interesting film news. As of our recording, last night was the Grammys. I have to say, I actually watched the Grammys, and I think it was the first time since I was in high school that I did. I'm not totally sure why I did, but I didn't hate it. It was kind of weirdly fun, I guess. And we found out earlier in the day, because it was not presented on the show, although she was there, that Viola Davis won an EGOT officially with a Grammy that she received for audiobook work that she did. And she became the third Black woman to ever win an EGOT after Whoopi Goldberg and Jennifer Hudson. Well deserved. Any I guess Max, I'll ask you, of the EG, the O, and the T, what's your favorite Viola Davis moment?
Oh man, that's a spot. I mean, I most really know her acting career on film as opposed to on the stage.
Sure.
Although,
yeah,
I think
she was an acclaimed stage actress before she was like really well known in film now.
Yeah, I think like Rhode Island like kind of tips its hat to her because like I think she either worked at the Trinity Repertory Theater in Providence, Rhode Island, or I think she was even born in Fall River, Rhode Island. So I think like whenever she does well, you see it in the local Rhode Island papers, and I'm just really happy for her. She's well deserving.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah,
Not going
I'm
to put
kind
you
of the
quite
same
on
way
this.
where
Yeah,
I'm much more familiar with her as a film actress. Uh, for- as far as performances, I did love The Woman King this year. I thought was a
yeah,
tremendous film, and obviously her Oscar-winning work in Fences was great. And probably Widows and Ma Rainey's Black Bomb were my other two top performances from her as an actress.
yeah. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, she was great in. I think it's hard to put myself back 2 years, but I remember thinking she was going to win for that because had the Fences situation where she was supporting actress, even though that was a little bit of a sketchy categorization, but still like a well-deserved winner. I also love like she does like sort of like the bureaucrat so well, and it's like we found out there was like the big DC announcement from James Gunn about a week ago or so, where that they're going to do like a larger Waller project with her, which is kind of interesting. But she also like she's so good, I think, in Michael Mann's Black Hat. And she like popped up in a whole bunch of movies like in roles like that. I remember in like the early 2000s recognizing her from various projects like before she kind of like made it big, and she's like really good at that stuff too, as well as kind of like the bigger media roles. So she can really kind of do everything, and she's just a wonderful talent. And even though I'm not super familiar with the project that won her a Grammy, it's nice to see somebody who has been doing it for so long and really just had this like moment, later in her career that doesn't always happen to a lot of actors and actresses, but very well deserved. So good on you, Viola Davis. Super happy for Rhode Island and Max as well for their contributions. But we'll move on to some other news.
Well, John, I want to reiterate what we missed at the beginning. Brian, John is from Philadelphia, so he's a big Philadelphia Eagles fan, and so he is very nervous about Sunday's big game.
Why do you think I'm nervous?
Come on, you have to face Patrick Mahomes, and
so Gimpy Mahomes, give me a break.
Yeah.
No, I'm petrified.
Honestly, I am rooting for the Eagles this year. I mean, I like Mahomes, I like the Chiefs, but it's like, you know what? I would love to see the Eagles win, and it would just be so insanely crazy that they basically have two Super Bowls with completely different main people behind them in 5 years.
It is crazy. We have like 4 people on the team from the Super Bowl year, which is, it is hard to imagine that they could rebuild and be back so quickly. But, we'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic as hell, but I'm not like nervous. I'm not confident. I'm somewhere in the middle, and we'll see what happens. But, with the Super Bowl, not just football and food and all the fun stuff that goes with it, but a lot of big movie trailers. And that's always one of the sort of highlights of the commercials, between the Budweiser folks and all the car commercials. And I don't know if M&Ms are canceled or not, but but we are going to get some movie trailers presumably. And Max, like it seems like people are kind of anticipating what's going to come from a movie trailer perspective based off of release dates and things that we have seen and haven't seen yet, right?
Yeah, and there's like I think like Deadline or something posted like what they believe is going to be there, like not worth noting like any big surprises, like if there's going to be like a Indiana Jones spot that maybe they
or like they're dropping another Cloverfield movie.
Yeah.
But on the list, like Fast 10 seems like kind of a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
New Transformers spot, potentially Ant-Man with that coming out, just like less than a week later. the Flash, maybe, I guess, with DC kind of percolating in the news, like they're gonna kind of hit the gas on that, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's one that people are anticipating, even if there's a lot of baggage with that Flash movie now. I just think that after James Gunn was talking it up recently, and um, despite Ezra Miller's troubled recent history, uh, I thought they were one of the better parts of the Justice League movie. So it'll be it's definitely a fascinating project, for better or
Yeah,
worse.
you could say that again. Brian, are there any of the trailers for the movies that I mentioned or potential other ones that like you're especially curious about?
It's interesting because of the fact that I've seen basic lists of what we're possibly going to get, and the thing that's so striking about it is the fact that they're all films where most of them are films that we basically have already seen something about. I think really the only one that is just coming out of nowhere with the first new footage, the only two really that are potential with new footage that we've never haven't seen anything from are Fast 10 and The Flash. So really those are the only two that I think I'm more curious about because we've seen stuff from Scream, we've seen Dungeons and Dragons, Transformers, Creed 3, John Wick, and it's one of those things where a lot of the Disney projects. Uh so it really just kind of depends on how those two trailers land more than anything to see what we're what might create the most buzz.
Am I like crazy to think that like maybe we'll see a spot for Killers of the Flower Moon?
Yes.
Am I okay? Yeah, fair enough. I just wanted to put that out there.
Like maybe like, have you seen the Timothy Chalamet like Apple ad? So like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that mentions Killers of the Flower
Yeah,
Moon.
I've seen that. I just wondered if it was going to be something more specific and it was like a big Apple push, but I would guess that now that I'm saying talking out loud and thinking through this for the first time, that we'll probably be more likely to see like a Ted Lasso spot for the new season of that versus an Apple Plus movie.
Yeah,
But yeah, with the sports crossover.
yeah,
But
yeah. As much as I'd love to see an ad for that because of the fact that I it's funny. I just finished listening to your most anticipated of this year, so I know how much you guys are both looking forward to it. I have a feeling we're probably not going to see anything from that before cans.
yeah,
At least
yeah.
I
I mean,
don't
that
think.
makes the most sense for sure. And if you want to hear us talk more about it, you can go back to our most anticipated movies of last year
Yeah.
episode, right? Or anybody else listening, because it was, I think, at the top of both of our lists then as well. So yeah, I'm a little bit antsy, I suppose, but so it is. Um, one last bit of news before we jump over to our top 10 lists. This is something that like really set me off this morning, and I'm not on social media, so I don't know if everybody was having the same reaction. I'm guessing they were, but AMC announced that they are going to introduce a new sort of tiered pricing a model for its theaters, wherein there's going to be like sort of cheap seats in the front rows and more expensive seats in like the like hot middle of the theater. And then I guess everything else stays the same. A little bit unclear, but this was just like, oh, well, my first reaction was I texted it to a friend of mine. I was like, this is like the thing today that is going to come out, but it'll won't exist in like 6 weeks because like the internet will bully them into like saying it was actually a mistake and we never meant to do it. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition, but it definitely felt like this week's version of the Netflix password debacle. So I don't know, but like Brian, you saw this. First of all, correct me if I'm wrong about any of the details. I think I got the gist of it, but what was kind of your take on this when you saw it at first?
so that is the basic gist of it. I mean, one of my first things I'm thinking is Steven Spielberg was kind of right, because he
Mm.
basically kind of predicted something along these lines when he said that, more and more over the next few years, we're going to see movies become something more akin to like Broadway or concerts and stuff like that, more of a special event than a regular going. I mean, I'm not sure they necessarily anticipated something like this from movie theaters, but I think because of the way that the pricing has gone up over the years, you can definitely. I understand where he's coming from. I still don't entirely believe that's gonna end up happening. Um, Apparently, A-list members are going to be fine with this. Like they're gonna get like perks for something like this. I can't remember. I'm not an A-list member, but I mean, honestly, it just is. If I'm a regular moviegoer, uh, it honestly just dulls the idea of going to see a movie in a theater just a little bit more with this, because I mean, one of the complaints you always hear about is how expensive it is between tickets and concession it is to go see a movie, and I can't imagine this helping matters any.
No, it just feels like it's gonna just confuse a lot of folks who are not like super paying attention. Like I think about my parents who like to go to the movies but aren't like keeping up with theater news, and they'll just be like, what is this?" Like, and just kind of feel like maybe discouraged and like they're not gonna bother. But Max, like, kind of bring it home. What was your take, and where do you think we see this go?
Yeah, so when I saw it this morning, my first reaction was like, how are they ever going to enforce this in the movie theater, right? So
Right.
you could just buy like a normal ticket and then sit
Or
in
the
the
cheap ticket.
yeah, right, sit in the preferred sight line. I mean, outside of like 7 o'clock on a Friday or Saturday night when those seats are going to be filled regardless, and you won't be able to move too much. Yeah, you're gonna be able to take advantage whenever you need to. I saw something online where people were showing the theaters that were already gearing up for this trial run, and like how the seats were going to be like set up, and like what areas were the preferred sight lines, and it's just like very ridiculous. And like you said, Brian, audiences going to see these movies won't really recognize like all these different price tiers for preferred seating. They'll just be like, wow, going to the movies has gotten really expensive, and maybe they'll make another choice. I like in this past weekend, I guess the movie 80 for Brady opened up, and they did like matinee prices for like all showings of the movie in theaters, and that was a big success for them. I mean, I don't know if necessarily uh it would have changed the amount of people going, because I didn't know that that was something they were going to do, but
Right.
it certainly probably made people feel good when they bought their tickets and they're like, oh wow, I got a discount. And
Was it gonna make them feel bad when they buy their next ticket, I guess.
right. Real bad.
But no, I saw the same thing. I thought that was interesting. Seemed like it made sense for that demographic that was going to see 80 for Brady. But did you go see 80 for Brady, Max? As a past
I
one?
no, I did not, and I
Okay,
don't
not
plan
yet,
to.
not yet,
No,
obviously.
I'm not gonna see it.
Oh, okay. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, like I said, by the time we record next, this might be old news, or it's going to take over, and we're just going to get used to it. It's hard to say for sure, but it's certainly an interesting idea, and
The
one that I don't think anybody's excited about.
Yeah, the one thing I will say before we wrap this up is if theaters are going to bring back any type of special pricing, I would suggest them more bring back the twilight pricing between 4 and 6 o'clock that used to be the case, and because that's where that was it kind of like what they did for 80 for Brady, where like every movie's super discounted throughout from that 4 to 6 o'clock range, and it's one of those things where when that went away, it's like that's gonna be your biggest time, because people are gonna actively come see movies at that point. And then they can go to dinner afterwards as opposed to before, and it just would make much more sense to do something like than this. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right as far as the scene, because of the fact that most matinees, people are not going to be sitting in the seat that they're reserved for. Like, they're going to sit wherever they want. So, yeah, I think that industry is one where they're still struggling to figure out what it will take to get people back in the seats. But I mean, it's a combination of movies and making it more affordable to go to the movies than as opposed to less affordable.
Yeah, it seems like they had a specific idea in mind, and maybe that they're going about it in a ham-handed way. But
I mean, even on the other note, it's like with these shortened release windows, right? You say to yourself, "Well, I can wait 17 days to see the movie at home," and
yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah.
so
It's brutal. Cool. All right. Well, let's see what happens with that. In the meantime, we can go backwards to a time when there was no tiered pricing at movie theaters. 2022, the good old days. And I don't know. Maybe it wasn't the good old days. I'll say up front that like I was pretty unenthused about the movies of 2022 in general. I have a top 10. I love all the movies on my top 10. But just in general, like I was much less excited to watch movies and go to the movies this year than I had been in a while. And that like the quality of my top 10 is probably as low as I can remember. I don't want to speak for everybody. That's just sort of where I was at. I'm hoping 2023 turns that around a little bit. I'm just in general, as you can listen back to this from last week or last episode rather, but I'm like very bullish on a lot of the movies that are coming out this year. I think it's just there's a lot of stuff that just piques my interest in a way that 2022 didn't. Still like there's still good movies to be found for sure. Brian, like big picture take, any like highlights of 2022 outside of the individual films we're going to talk about, but just things that jumped out to you?
One of the things that I always have come to appreciate, when I think this past year was a particularly strong year for horror, especially some of the movies not on my list are Crimes of the Future, Bones and All, The Black Phone, and those are all movies I really loved. It's like, and I love movies, like I loved Apollo 10 and a half. It broke my heart that wasn't really much in the consideration of for animated feature. And I think this year we really started to see a few more, or at least I started to see a few more like action movies that were not just the usual um superhero stuff that we're used to making dents in the box office, or even just entertain me in general. There were a lot of really strong genre films and action films. I mean, some of those, there's going to be at least one of those that's on my list here. But overall, I did think this was a particularly strong year. I will say, like when I do my favorites list, I mean, I'm pulling from not just movies that people are familiar with, but people from smaller movies, from film festivals, and all that stuff. So, yeah, this is gonna be quite a variety for me.
yeah, I think I feel similar to you, John, in that the overall quality of the films, why I enjoy everything in my top 10, I'd say like there's more like, to put it in like a single like a star rating type deal. Let's say there's more 4-star films this year than there are like really 4.5, 5-star films, and like those are really fighting for like the top spots. um like even like say a film that I know plenty of people love and like could be on either of yours top 3 lists or top 10 as well, is something like Banshees of Inisherin, where like I think that's a fine movie, excellent movie if I'm saying, but like that has certainly been the type of movie that's been like this is the best of the year type idea. And so that's where like we're starting from. And I don't know, I I I would like to say that um I guess when I found myself trying to play for like different uh film groups, so like when I do my top 10 voting, I tried to stick to like stuff that was like more popular fare, because I figured uh those would be the stuff fighting for spots in a top 25, because like that's what you do like collectively, right? As
Mhm.
opposed to putting like
Yeah,
some
right.
like really left field choices out there that wouldn't tilt.
It's not going to rate either way. Yeah,
Right, it's not
I know
gonna
what you
tilt
mean.
the boat
I do the
either
same
way.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, hopefully I get to mention some movies here that I didn't get to mention on some of my published lists, and um we can get to it.
Let's jump right into it. I'll let you kind of just continue. Why don't you go through your numbers 10 through 4 on your list?
Okay, so when I first formulated my list, this is how I kind of envisioned it, and 10 was the aforementioned The Woman King with Viola Davis. I really enjoyed that movie. Thought it was fantastic filmmaking. And then number 9 was the documentary All That Breathes, which actually premieres on HBO Max. Um, Definitely by the time you hear this, because it premieres on February 7th. So that is excellent documentary on like these guys who just like try to save birds, and like they have no real reason to do it except that they feel like it's important. And it was just like a really moving movie, and I remember just loving it out of Sundance when I saw it last year. 8 was the new Ruben Östlund, The Triangle of Sadness. Um, I traditionally love his movies, and this one's no different. It has like a 3-act structure that uh, really worked for me, and it's like they're almost like the way that the acts work are almost like different movies, but they're connected by like a few different characters, and I think it's outrageous and well worth seeing. 7 was also one that I mentioned already, The Banshees of Inisherin. Just top to bottom, great performances. Would recommend it to just about anyone as long as they can handle some dark humor. 6 was Todd Field's Tar, which John and I talked about recently. Um, just a absolutely phenomenal performance by Kate Blanchett. I think the best she's ever been. And I thought, even though the movie can be a little wordy, I was still moved, and I thought it had some great cinematography and sound design. 5 was the A24 film After Sun, and this one is a little smaller, but got a lot of raves by critics. And its lead actor Paul Mescal was nominated in the Best Actor pool for the Academy Awards. It's this idea of a film where um, I guess like an older version of this woman is looking back at a vacation that she had with her father, and just the specific vacation and everything that went on during that time. And when you finally finish that movie, it leaves you shattered when you realize what you've just watched. And I really liked that one. And 4 was one of the biggest films of 22, Top Gun Maverick, a sequel I never imagined that I'd enjoy, probably more than the original, and just was blown away by it. It was, I think, the first movie I saw in theaters 3 times since
Cool.
Fellowship of the Ring. So
Wow.
yeah, I really dug it. So yeah, that's my 10 through 4.
All right, cool. Brian, how about I kick it over to you? What's your 10 through 4?
Okay, so my number 10 is a documentary that is currently on HBO Max. It's called Master of Light. It's about a classical painter, George Anthony Morton, who studied painting while he was in jail, and he uses his art as not only a way to bring classical ideas of art to black faces, but he also uses it as a way to heal his strained family. And the theme of using creative outlets to heal pain is something that I really connected to. And that's on HBO Max right now. Number 9 is the Batman, Matt Reeves. I absolutely loved. I don't know if I would say is necessarily my favorite Batman film, but I think it's my favorite Batman world. It really, it remind me in the same way Coppola created the world of The Godfather, where it's a very intimate story, but it's basically focused in on Gotham, but it also feels very epic. And just everything from the cast to the score to the cinematography to everything about the film just really does that. Number 8 is a movie that I saw at the Atlanta Film Festival called Portrait from Afar, and it's about an indigenous boy who has struggled to find his place after a tragedy, and one of the ways he does it is through telling stories and filmmaking. And if you're a fan of the Fabelmans, if this film ever uh, is available, it's something that I think is very rewarding. Uh, Number 7 is Apples by Christos Nico, and it's a comedy drama about a movie about a world where people's memories are disappearing almost on a whim, and the government has this plan set up in order to help assimilate these people back into living. And as we are still in a pandemic and still dealing with the ramifications of COVID and what governments did or did not do, this movie, which centers on one person trying to get their life back, really connected with me, and it's a wonderful film. Number 6 is The Banshees of Inisherin, which I absolutely. It's one of the best films I think it's ever been made about friendship, and in particular, male friendship. It's tremendous performances all around, and I just was entertained and enlightened by this film all the way through. Number 5 was Prey, Dan Trachtenberg's prequel to Predator, and it's honestly the Predator movie that I've been wanting since the original Predator. It it gets everything that I think works best about the movie while also doing something different with it in a way that's interesting. And my number 4 is Neptune Frost, which was it is an Afrofuturist musical that I saw at Sundance, and it just the music, the visuals, the stories of rebellion, of connecting in a world that exploits black people it was just something that really resonated with me. And every time it's one of those films where every time I saw it this year, it just built and built this feeling in me that this is a movie that I absolutely loved and will love watching every time I go back to it.
Cool. I mean, there was a number of titles on your list that I've never heard of, so I'm excited to explore those a little bit more,
John,
especially.
I know you don't do horror very much, but I had to agree with Brian that Prey is a really cool movie. I watched Predator for the first time uh, in 22 as well before watching Prey, and I just thought it was really cool.
So I actually watched Prey. Can you believe that?
Oh no, I can't believe that.
I thought it was quite good.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So not on my top 10, but I thought it was a good movie. I watched it with my family. They were wanting to watch it. I was like, okay. But it was riveting. Cool. Okay, so my top 10 starts. Everybody I think had at least one documentary. I'm no exception there. My number 10 is Senior, which is the Robert Downey Sr. / Robert Downey Jr. documentary, which is on Netflix, which I found both very amusing and moving. My number 9 is Kimmy, the Steven Soderbergh movie from earlier in this year. I've been a big fan. I mean, I've always been a big fan of his. I think his output since his comeback from retirement has been beyond outstanding. I think almost all of those movies have made their way onto my top 10 lists, and Kimmy was just, I think, a really enjoyable thriller about technology and a really great depiction of kind of like mid-pandemic world that I found just interesting. My number 8 movie is Avatar: The Way of Water, the biggest movie of the year, the most kind of immersive and engaging theater going experience I've had in a long time, probably since the first Avatar movie. Definitely a little bit bloated, but I felt like it's just the visual storytelling was, as exciting as anything I had going on this year for sure. So I was happy to include that. My number 7 is Armageddon Time, which I'm a big James Gray fan. We've talked about him many times on the podcast over the years. And I would say, somewhat pleasantly surprised by this movie because I don't think it was like his most well received. But also, I have this aversion to sort of the filmmaker telling mostly his, I guess, theoretically her own a childhood story, on film. And that's basically what this was. But nonetheless, I thought it worked really well. And it had a lot of really great performances that I treasured from this year. My number, what are we up to? 6 is the Batman. So a little bit of crossover here from Brian's list. I would just say, like, I think you said it better than I could. Like, a great exercise in world building, and I loved that they kind of drop us into it in media res. I like Avatar: The Way of Water, like a little bit bloated, but I just really liked a lot of the choices that Matt Reeves made, and I thought, I'd look forward to spending more time in that Bat universe with Robert Pattinson, which is not what I expected when they casted him. My number 5 is Glass Onion, Knives Out mystery. To me, it was like a step up over the first. I know that I'm I won't say I'm alone there, but I think most people thought that it was a step down. To me, I thought Knives Out was like a fine movie, and I think Glass Onion's like a very good movie. It's just heightens everything that I liked about the first, so it's just kind of scratched an itch that I didn't quite know needed to be scratched. But I thought the performances were super fun. And Janelle Monáe in particular was just a delight, and obviously Daniel Craig as well. And then my number 4 is 3,000 Years of Longing, the George Miller movie from the summer, which didn't really quite take off the same way Mad Max Fury Road did, to put it mildly. But we talked about it on the show. I just really loved it. I thought Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba were fantastic. I loved the storytelling choices, and after like the most kind of manic road movie in history, to basically like plant 2 actors in a hotel room for an hour 20 or so was kind of inspired. And I know Max and I went back and forth on what sort of happens after that, and we don't need to get into it here for those. About 6 people saw this movie, so I'm not going to spoil it, but I think it's interesting. Maybe not quite on the same high as everything that precedes it, but overall the movie was really, really well done and visually interesting and emotionally satisfying. So those are my 10 through 4, and I think we can jump into our top 3. I'm going to kick it to Max first, since you've been silent for a little while, and why don't you share your number 3, and we can talk a little bit about it as a group.
Yeah, so my number 3 movie is Steven Spielberg's The Fabelmans. And I don't know what I expected from it. I know that I had included it on my most anticipated in 2022 and back in January, just because it was a Spielberg project, and John and I were a little hesitant to be excited about it, because like he alluded to with Armageddon Time, some of these projects about exploring your childhood as a director don't always pan out all that well. But this one works pretty well. Spielberg makes a cipher of himself and the young man of Sammy Fabelman. He's collaborating with Tony Kushner again on the script after doing West Side Story together, and I'm sure they've worked together elsewhere.
In Lincoln, yeah.
Yeah. But the movie follows Sammy Fabelman's growing affection for film after seeing the greatest show on earth, to making his own movies and innovating when he can and following his career. But the movie is not only about the cipher of Steven Spielberg. It also is about his parents, and more specifically his mother, known as Mitzi Fabelman. She is the main focus of his movie, and she's played by Michelle Williams. And I don't know, there's some scenes in the movie that seem like, oh well, this is clearly trying to evoke something. Like I'm pretty certain my two co-hosts today have seen this movie, and like when Michelle Williams is dancing in front of a car, you're like, this is like really honestly trying to like grab you. And I understand like Spielberg's the master at this, but also there's something about that also feels a little contrived in that moment. And I don't know like how much of this story is verbatim his life. I think a lot of it is, but like some of it elsewhere is just, it's hard. I don't know if necessarily it's hard to imagine, but it's a little bit harder to imagine. There's this really funny scene later in the movie where Sammy Fabelman is getting a girlfriend, and like she's like trying to convert him from Judaism to Christianity, and it's like one of the most like outrageous sequences in the entire movie, and quite funny. And I saw other people marveling, I guess, even further in the movie, when he's making a like class video on like their class trip, and like how the big bully of the film is just shocked at how he's portrayed in the film. And there's a lot of really great moments in it, and you could say it's like kind of travels through the ages, kind of like Spielberg's Catch Me If You Can, another movie that I love from early 2000s, and shows a young man growing up and facing all these different dilemmas. But yeah, I think now seeing like how it's been taken by audiences and like just the public at large, like maybe they look at the movie and they're like, oh, that's a Spielberg movie, and this is like the type of quality we should expect from Spielberg, even though like it won the People's Choice film easily. But I think that it's more than that. I think it 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 he said during his Q&A that the pandemic made like kind of forced his hand to make this movie, because he realized maybe he was running out of time to make this type of movie. And so he used the time of the pandemic to create this script and put it together. And I'm glad that he put the story to the screen. All right, so yeah, that was me talking about the Fabelmans and just waxing poetically about that movie. Brian, I'm excited to hear your number 3 movie. Can you share it with us?
So my number 3 is Christian Taftrup's Speak No Evil. This is a movie that I saw at the Sundance Film Festival, and it rattled me. There are very few horror movies that outright scare me. This one just really left marks on me. It's currently on Shudder, but it is a terrific film about the importance of having difficult conversations with people, especially if something uncomfortable is needing to be said. And it there are times where it gets really ridiculous. There are times where it feels like it's going to a place where uh it's really uh it's really absurd, but the ending of this movie especially is really a gut punch, and there are some of the most unsettling moments that I've seen in a horror film this year.
Yeah, I actually I saw this on Shudder, and I had heard really good things about Speak No Evil, and it's good hearing you say that it really moved you, that you put it in your top three here.
Yeah, and I actually had a chance to talk to the director at Sundance, and it was funny because of the fact that I watched it twice. I watched it once via screener, and then I watched it again as a second showing at Sundance. And it was funny when I talked to the director. I knew I really liked it, but I was not completely sure why, and was still really processing my thoughts about it. So when I did finally rewatch it prior to the release on Shudder, it just really confirmed everything that I loved about it at Sundance, and it sort of like Neptune Frost. Every time I've seen it, it just really it grows in my appreciation for it more and more.
Oh, cool. I don't think that this is a movie that John would really seek out.
Probably not. I mean, Prey was like a big leap for me. Hard to know for sure exactly, um, how much worse this is from how distressing it might be, but it sounds like it's something that spoke to you and others who were able to seek it out. So I'm glad for that. Might not be for me, but in terms of a movie that was for me and my number three, it's something that was on both of your top tens already. It's the Banshees of Inisherin. Max, are you a little bit surprised that this made my list?
I don't know if I'm surprised. I mean, you're a famous hater of Three Billboards, so
Yes, right. Well, that's what I was referring to specifically. That was probably one of our biggest debates over the years was Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, which was the previous film from writer-director Martin McDonagh, which I was found. Well, we don't need to get into that again. But yeah, I was kind of I guess a little bit nervous about this movie that it would kind of like hit not the same notes because it's a very different setting and different characters and whatnot, but just would also not work for me in some similar way. But that was not the case. It definitely was much closer to In Bruges, which was his first movie, which I really loved. And I love the setting. I love the cinematography. I love all the performances. I mean, 4 actors and actresses from this movie nominated for Oscars. Not surprising when you watch the movie and see how good, what high level everybody's operating on. Colin Farrell was, I think, probably the most memorable performance. He's the lead here and just giving, I think, his career's best work, which is a high bar. I mean, he was also really good in the Batman this year. It was a pretty good Colin Farrell year. But yeah,
after Yang too.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. After Yang as well. I just loved like how simple the movie is in terms of like the question at its heart, which is just sort of like, you know, how do you stop being friends with somebody? I guess there's like different variations of what that question is, but it's kind of like the simplicity at its heart, and then it ends up being something which is just like very existential in a way that I was like it kind of unsettled me, but I found really gripping and interesting. And at the same time, like there's humor to be found, in the village and everything like that. It just kind of like checks so many boxes, and it does so in a way that's really impressive and original. And so I'm grateful for this movie. It's really like almost a tie amongst my top three. I feel like there's like a level up from 4 to 3, and I had a really hard time parsing it, but Banshees of Inisherin is my number 3. Anything? I mean, you guys already talked a lot about it a little bit, but it was earlier in the podcast, so I want to give you an opportunity to extrapolate if you're so inclined. And Brian, if not, that's okay. But anything else you want to add on Banshees?
One last thing I will say is this might be one of my favorite Carter Burwell
Great call.
scores. I think he does a tremendous job in this, and I mean I'm a huge Carter Burwell fan from obviously his work with the Coens, and it's always struck me as disappointing that it took so long for him to get his first Oscar nomination with Carol, but I'm glad that we now have another one, especially for the score that's really deserving, I think, in this movie. But yeah, I adore this movie.
Max, anything else that you want to add on Banshees?
No, and I mean, you can see where this movie has done so well with critics groups and been so awarded because it ranked highly on all 3 of our lists, despite our lists being so varied. It's just a really beloved movie, I guess, by a lot of people.
Yeah, understandably so. So, very good. I think we're over to Max, and you're number 2.
Yeah, so I wrote a little bit about this director on the It's the Pictures newsletter, and that is director Sarah Polley, who directed the film Women Talking, which is my second favorite film of the year. Yeah, I don't. It's funny because like we talked earlier about the differences between movies and plays, and when you watch Women Talking, it's very easy to imagine the stage play version of this script that takes place in a barn where these decidedly they should be uneducated, but Sarah Polley gives us a great line that does a lot of lifting in the movie, where it says like this is like a fantasy, and once you take that into consideration, you can imagine how these women are able to have this long and detailed conversation about how their future should be, despite being kind of suppressed by the men of their lives for many years. Their lives and their pretty nondescript area village is that they um they have a decision to make, whether they can decide to stay in their situation. They can try to fight back, or they can leave, and ultimately that's what this group of women have to decide. It's just a fantastic ensemble, from Jessie Buckley to Rooney Mara, and you also have Ben Winshaw does a terrific job in this as I believe one of the few, if not the only man that's actually given speaking lines or seen in the movie. He is the compassionate one that kind of like helps guide them, and it's a kind of thankless role at that farm village. um it's a movie that I was afraid would get overlooked as the awards started coming out, and even going into Oscar nominations, it was easy to imagine it being overlooked, and I would have thought that was a shame, because I thought it was that type of large ensemble discussion piece that reminded me of something like 12 Angry Men, and I just was blown away by the movie when I first saw it. I think I saw it with some friends. I was just like saying like how um, I thought it was like a monumental achievement in film, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope more people seek it out, as it leaves theaters with a small theater run, and it becomes available to more people at home.
Yeah, I will say Sarah Polley doesn't miss as a director, and this is a it's not on my personal list, but it's on the list that I'm sharing tonight. But it is a tremendous film. It was one that just uh, really profoundly moved me with the way that Polly you brought up 12 Angry Men. It's a perfect comparison because it's essentially about some of these women getting some of the other women to understand where they're coming from and why what they're saying matters. And I mean, this is, and the whole thing is basically boiling down to getting the audience to uh to listen to what these women have to say. And I think more than anything on this topic, and I think it's a tremendous double feature with She Said, because they both cover they both cover the same basic idea of women's voices have been suppressed by men, and but they come at it from different perspectives. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about what Polly does in this film is that it basically asks, it answers that question that so many people have when accusers come up. Well, what took you so long to speak out? And women talking is like, for 100 minutes, this is what took me so long to speak out. And it's never an easy question. There's so many different things that you have to take into perspective, and it's a brilliant movie.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo all of that. It's not on my top 10 either, but I thought it was a very good movie. I was happy to see that it ended up with the Best Picture nomination, because it just was so quiet toward the end of the year in terms of, its profile, I think, because it hadn't really seen much of a release. And I felt like it was riding high in the fall festivals, but we were pretty far removed from those. And it was just, a mild surprise for me. It didn't get a ton of other nominations, but it still ended up with Best Picture as one of the 10, which was great. And I'll agree with what Brian said in terms of Sarah Polley not really missing as a director. And I'm sure I've talked about this movie before, but Take This Waltz was one of my favorite movies of, I think, 2012 when it came out. Which is 10 years ago, which is insane. But Women Talking is I think inarguably probably her most like relevant movie in terms of like where it sits within larger conversations around our culture and where we have been and where we need to go, and so it feels like it's speaking more to where we are right now. And I think that gives it some added heft and hopefully relevance when other people are able to see it. And, hard to know exactly how that's going to go, but it's definitely a worthy film, and I'm happy to see you acknowledge it here, Max. I think we're over to Brian for his number 2.
So my number 2 is Coconada's After Yang.
We just mentioned it, yeah.
And, this is again, it's funny. Like 4 through 2 for me are all movies I saw at Sundance and all movies I've seen multiple times at this point. And After Yang is a movie that is just, it's one of the most profound movies about life and death I think we've had in recent memory, because it deals with the idea of how far would somebody go to take care of a loved one, and what do people do in terms of when a loved one is fading away. And I think, there this is one of those movies like Women Talking where there are so many various questions that are come up in terms of the larger perspective of this. And I think the way that they wrestle with what to do with Yang as it becomes more and more clear that he probably is not going to be saved. What is a fitting end for him, and how do we want him to be remembered? And it's a movie that really just is beautifully emotional. It's humane. It's the type of science fiction that I really love, which is science fiction that explores ideas as much as it does present new ideas and new visions of what the future would be. This is something that feels like we are probably not far removed from having something like this take place. And it's a wonderful film, beautiful performances. This is another one of Colin Farrell's great performances, as we talked about with Banshees. And it's a wonderful film, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump on here and say like for people unfamiliar with After Yang, Yang in particular is a android, and I like how Brian talks about Yang and like the idea that it didn't necessarily matter whether or not he was an android, and certainly that's the way that the movie that's something the movie wrestles with, and he was definitely a part of the family, and you can imagine that would be difficult for anything like if your proxy is like a pet or something at home. You can imagine having similar feelings.
I haven't seen After Yang, so my apologies for that to Brian and to all the people who love After Yang and who want me to talk about it. But with how much I enjoyed the other Colin Farrell performances this year that we talked about, I suppose I should probably rectify that very soon.
It has one of the best opening credit sequences of the year, easily.
Nice.
Oh yeah.
Very good, very good. So I think we're over to my number 2, right?
Yeah.
So my number 2 is The Menu, which I guess dabbles in some horror as well. To kind of jump on that topic again, like unexpectedly.
It absolutely does.
Yeah, it's just like it's weird that like I kind of caught up with more of these than you'd have expected, and at least in this one case, like really just enjoyed the hell out of it. I mean, it is kind of like the really horror-esque version of a Glass Onion type story, with it being not the same thing where it's a whodunit, but it's more of a howdunit because you know sort of where it's going to go and you're just trying to figure out how it's going to get there. And it's also just kind of like let's all eat the rich, which I guess was a theme that I found especially moving this year for whatever reason. But really, for me, it was just like this movie kept me on my toes. And it's funny because, it's for those who are maybe somewhat unfamiliar, it's about this like very acclaimed chef who runs a restaurant on a private island. And he invites like an exclusive group of individuals to have, a very unique dining experience. And for like the first 20 to 30 minutes or so, when you're just kind of getting acclimated to the place and having the first few like extremely douchey dishes introduced to you, I'm just like laughing hysterically. And I'm like, afterwards, I kept thinking, I'm like, the movie could have just been that and still probably would have ended up in my top 10 because I just found it so funny with Nicholas Hoult trying to like, impress this girl and some of these other characters who just like really are just so awful without having really done anything but celebrate this like non-food that's being presented to them. And then obviously it sort of morphs into something totally different. And I was happy to kind of follow them down that road. And then every sort of sequence, there's a dish that goes with it. And kind of a story that's being told and a focus maybe on one of the characters. And every time it does that, like, it just kind of goes more and more into this like crazy world, and it's just like surprising what you find. And so I just, like I said, it's just kind of a ride I was happy to go on. I don't know how it would hold up on a second watch. I'm curious. I'd like to watch it again, because so much of the joy was kind of being surprised at what's happening and what's unfolding. But I'll kind of, whether it holds up well or not, I think I'll definitely always treasure the first watch, which um, it's kind of funny. I watched Banshees of Inisherin, and the one night, this was like, but somewhere between Christmas and New Year's, I want to say. And like that's later that same night, I watched The Menu. And there's a very specific shared thread between those two movies, which kind of caught me off guard. But yeah, and they were ended up being my number 3 and my number 2. So that was a fun day.
Yeah, I dare you to not want a cheeseburger after seeing that movie.
Oh yeah, that too. I mean, that's great. Max, what did you think about The Menu?
Yeah, I really dug it too, and funny that you would mention this right after Banshees of Inisherin and stuff like that, because it has that like same like kind of dark edge to it, right? Like, certainly that if you're on board, if it's like dark humor, you will definitely get a kick out of it, and where it goes, and it's funny, even like I saw a lot of people talking about the supporting performance from Hong Chow, who was more acclaimed this year for her supporting role in The Whale, but she's exceptional in The Menu as well.
Agreed.
And it's just it's not. I don't think like it's a like masterpiece in the traditional sense, but it's just like so darn enjoyable that like it's hard not to just dig it.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that, but for me, it was just so much fun to watch. Brian, thoughts on The Menu?
Unfortunately, I don't have any because I still have
Okay.
not seen it yet. But everything I've heard about it has me so fascinated to finally catch up to it. Especially one with a friend of mine who's a big horror person who absolutely loved it. So it's like, okay, that means I really need to see it because he's very particular on his horror, and so yeah. His recommendation definitely goes for something. So I will be catching up with it hopefully in the next month.
We'll have to trade number 2s sometime with you checking out The Menu, and I'll catch up with After Yang. I think that would be a fair trade. But yeah, I guess we're down to our number 1s, and we'll continue in the same order we've been going. Max, you're up.
Yeah, so this should be no surprise to anybody who's heard me all year long. And maybe I thought it was going to be a somewhat unique choice months ago, but it's become maybe the favorite, and that is A24's Everything Everywhere All at Once. I just became enamored with this movie when I saw it. Even I had heard the raves out of South by Southwest, and I was not expecting to maybe even love it as much as that, given that this is the follow up from The Men Who Directed Swiss Army Man, which is a very a selective taste type of movie. I don't think everybody would love that one. But this one just hits a lot of great moments for me, from its love of kung fu and Michelle Yeoh's history in that genre, and her filmography, and how much of the movie just depends on her performance, and how versed she is in all those different genres. Then you have great supporting roles, and just like really it mixes drama and comedy in such a delightful fashion that like there's moments where you could be on the edge of your seat laughing because of just how ridiculous it is, and then other moments where you could be moved by what's unfolding on the screen, this like generational trauma that's bestowed upon Michelle Yeoh's character of expectations, and how she's passing the same trauma down to her daughter, played by Stephanie Hsu. And yeah, I there's it even references like many of my favorite movies, like In the Mood for Love and 2001 Space Odyssey. So it just it's saying to me, and I was on its fan train the whole ride. So yeah, I really love this film. um John and I think talked recently about his opinion on the film, and um just like it was a little much for him. Brian, do you have an opinion on this one?
It's on my list, but it's honestly one of the best films I've ever seen. Um, Kehu Kwang was my favorite performance of the year. I'm so glad that he's having his moment, and this this is this is the type of movie that I think if you're somebody who if you're somebody like him who felt rejected from by the industry, this is the type of movie I feel like you want to have come your way when you have when you decide, okay, I'm going to give it another shot. And the fact that it did, and the fact that he is so he's like, his performances, as somebody who loves Temple of Doom and Goonies and watched those when I was a kid, it's just so gratifying to see him have this moment, just have this performance.
Well, Brian, and it's funny too. Like you championed After Yang, and last year I championed 9 Days, and it's just like these are the type of cast that I want to see in my movies too, and want to and champion, and like how they're like kind of unique and like varied, and we it's too often where we see the same kind of group of people, same viewpoints, and I think it's really
Yeah.
exciting when you get to see all these varied viewpoints, and these are the type of movies that I want to see.
But no, this is one of the few movies I've given 5 stars on Letterboxd. I'm very particular when I do that, and if I do that, it means it's something that it's one of the best movies I've ever seen, and it's on my list, but it is one that I cherish and cannot wait to rewatch.
I would say, like, Max, you accurately summed up my thoughts for sure, but um there's years where like the consensus movie that everybody seems to like fawn over, I'm like sort of stumped by, and I'm like not at all stumped by like why people are fawning over this movie. I totally get it. I admire the hell out of it. I do think that like it could have been the circumstances under which I watched it, which was having COVID, and feeling like maybe this was the wrong choice of movie for right now. So like I know I need to rewatch it, but it's just like I didn't have that magical experience with it that I think I was anticipating, because like pretty much everyone else I know did. And it made me a little bit sad, but like I see all the ingredients. I really love the performances, everybody who's already been mentioned, and I'm sure others that haven't yet been mentioned, but it really kind of like checks every box from like what you'd want out of a best movie of the year. And there's just, for me, like this kind of like, I think mostly circumstantial or hard to define quality that held me back a little bit. But I still root for it, if that makes sense. Like I root for its actors whenever there's one of these awards shows popping up and they're all there. And I root for the Daniels. I think they're just like really interesting, exciting filmmakers, even though, yeah, like Swiss Army Man. Like this movie was not like a perfect movie for me. I was just kind of like, but I was like, okay, like that's kind of cool. Like nobody else is doing stuff like this. Like I can get on board and hope that they can kind of keep making movies like this until the right one kind of reaches me, right? So yeah, I think it's not a surprising choice. I'm frankly surprised that only one of us had it on our top 10 list, but I think the praise is still like close to unanimous, and it definitely is. It has like movie of the year quality. So very good choice. Brian, your number one.
So my favorite movie of this past year was one that, as soon as I saw the trailer, I knew was gonna wreck me, and it was Steven Spielberg's The Fabelmans. It's I'm Spielberg is my favorite filmmaker of all time, and the thing that really struck me so much about this one is that he was still able to surprise me. And that is something that, you look at some of the films that he's done over the past 20 years or so since like AI, and it feels like some of his movies like Bridge of Spies, like BFG, I'll enjoy them, but they're not something that overly surprises me. I feel like the Fableman surprised me in the way that he seemed to be very clear eyed in looking at his upbringing through the reflection of Sammy Fableman his and showing us his love of filmmaking, where that came from, what he gets from both of his parents, who are wildly different individuals, and how you get to that point where you see your parents as grown-ups, as adults, and more than just the people who raised you. And I think that's one of the things that's so beautiful about what he does in this. I the arc, and I've said this on other podcasts actually talking about the movie, the arc between Sammy Vagelman and Mitzi, as played by Gabrielle LaBelle and Michelle Williams, is one of my favorite arcs I think I've ever seen in a Spielberg film. I love the complexity of that arc because of the fact that it gets to something where no matter how much you love your parents, there are still times you can still have moments where those parents are your worst enemy, but you also can have moments where they're your best friend. And I think the way that this film builds that arc is remarkable. And it's supposedly is not completely done yet, but John Williams' score in this film is it's one of my favorites of his for Spielberg because of how simple and beautiful it is.
Obviously, Max already included the Fablemans. Where was it on your list, Max? Number three, right? That's what I thought. Um, I don't want to be Johnny Downer here. I sort of teed it off with my Armageddon Time thoughts that like I'm not a huge fan of like the filmmaker telling his story. And I wouldn't say I dislike the Fablemans, but it didn't like it didn't do anything for me that I kind of was already expecting it to do, which like still makes it I think a good movie, but it definitely like in a different way than Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think sort of my expectations for it held me back a little bit. In that one, it was just like, oh, I was expecting it to be the greatest movie ever, and it wasn't quite that, and so I felt like mildly deflated. The Fablemans, like, I in some ways almost exceeded my expectations, but still was like a story that like I knew kind of for the most part how it was going to proceed, and I found myself kind of at the end wishing that there was just a little bit more there that I could like grab onto outside of Steven Spielberg makes good movies. But that's my kind of bias going in with movies like this, and it just is really hard for me to kind of shake it. But I'm obviously grateful that people have had so many wonderful experiences with the Fabelmans, and still like hope that whatever you'll say about like the box office run that Spielberg's been on the last couple movies, like is not going to deter you know him from being able to do whatever he wants to do, or people from maybe deciding to check one of these out, because he's still one of the best. He's still got it. I think West Side Story, which just came out last year, was well, I guess now 2 years ago from when we're recording, but the prior year to the one we're discussing was sensational, and just and weird, because I'm like, oh well, it didn't do anything expecting, but what you could say that about West Side Story too. It just kind of sung for me more, no pun intended. But I think that yeah, I'll always look forward to his movies, even if this one wasn't like on the top of my Spielberg list or my 2022 list.
Well, John, I
Yeah.
had to say, if we're taking Knox, that Armageddon Time was probably near my bottom films of the year.
Oh, well, you're entitled to your opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not going to punish you too badly, but
No, we widely disagree on that one. But John, I think I know what your number one film is, and I think everybody else wants to know what it is.
I think everybody else probably knows what my number one movie is as well. And it is Top Gun Maverick. I was a couple minutes late to recording this because I was finishing up watching Top Gun Maverick.
Wait, where was Tar on this list?
Oh, it's yeah, like 12 or so, I guess.
What?
You're surprised?
Yes, I thought for sure Tar would be number one.
No, Tar was definitely not my number one. I found Tar to be a really great movie to talk about, an interesting conversation piece, and to be like, you know, a bit of a slog to watch. Like I felt like I was lower on it than you were. Well, I obviously I
You
was,
are,
but
yeah.
when we talked about it, I thought I couched that pretty well, but maybe I was just like excited to be in the thralls of conversation on Tar. But yeah, it was like a very good movie with an outstanding performance that was not I don't think top 10 worthy for me, but
Well, let's hear about the small indie movie Top Gun Maverick.
yeah, sure. Okay, let's do that. Let's do that. No, it's funny. Like I said, I was just finishing watching it, and I was watching it with my wife who hadn't seen it, and I was saying I'm going to do my top 10 lists and on the podcast, and what's your number one? It's Top Gun. And she's like, really? I was like, it's really good, And she's like, all right, I'll watch it, and it's really not really her thing. And we watched it in two halves. The first half, I think is very good setup, reintroducing the characters, everything. And I did find myself kind of wondering, I'm like, oh, is this like still my number one movie? Like, of seeing it at home now, it like, I think there's just like some maybe story overload coming in the first half of the movie. And then today I was like, let's finish this up, because I legitimately need to decide if it's still my number one or if I need to swap it down a spot or two. And by the time I got to the end and I'm just like trying to hold back tears, I'm just like, oh, obviously this is still number one. It's just like so manipulated, but like I love it. I'll just like go on this ride with them through the canyon of undisclosed nation, and everything that kind of happens from there was so exhilarating and still really held up well. And I was really thinking about it and just wishing that like they just pulled the trigger and gave Tom Cruise an Oscar nomination for this. It would have been so fun and weird, but whatever. And that I don't know if it still has a chance to win Best Picture. I'm guessing it doesn't, but that would be fun too. It's a great movie. It's a great movie story. Obviously not an indie darling or anything to that effect, but I think that it's nice to have a movie like this that didn't surprise in terms of it being successful, but I think how successful and how many people it brought out into theaters and for how long. It's just like there's not been like a box office type of story like that, I think, in a long time. I mean, you could
Until
debate
Avatar 2.
yeah, I think it's different. I think it's different. Like, that's just James Cameron. Like, he's done this every single time, and I think that like you attribute it to James Cameron, but I don't think that anybody could like have attributed Top Gun to any one thing. And it's just, you know, I think to have somebody else do it, whoever you want to say that is, if it's Joseph Kosinski or the Top Gun brand or Tom Cruise or whatever, it was just very, you know, kind of caught everybody off guard. And I think the quality is part of the reason why it did. But yeah, it's my number one.
Yeah, this is a movie that I really enjoyed. I did get a chance to see it in IMAX, and it's one of those movies that was built for the big screen, and that's something that I really love about it. But you know, I before it came out, I was very bullish on the idea of Top Gun Maverick. It's like, who wants to, I mean, I know the first one is beloved by a large degree of people, but it's like, it's fine. It's a good movie, but it does it really need a sequel? And I mean, you know, I still don't know, you know, I mean, to a certain extent, I mean, most sequels don't really need to exist, but I think it's a matter of, does it earn the right to exist? And I think Top Gun Maverick definitely did that because of the fact that we're genuinely seeing Maverick in a different time in his life than he was during the first one. And I think that's one of the things that's really important about a really strong sequel, especially to something like Top Gun. You have to feel like you're following this character on progression through their lives. I think if you're just, you know, Mission Impossible is its own different thing, and you're expecting different things from that. You're not necessarily expecting Ethan Hunt to grow considerably from movie to
Yeah,
movie.
agreed.
You're just expecting to see really tremendous stunts and spy stories come through. And I think you get that from that. And I mean, Tom Cruise being able to understand that he couldn't just do that with this is one of the reasons that the film works. And it's a really good movie. I know I thought it was good. I thought it was really entertaining the first time I saw it. Second time I saw it, I definitely felt stronger about it. I definitely liked it more than I did the first time. But yeah, this was a movie that I really liked.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who hasn't liked it that I've talked to in real life or online or otherwise, I guess. But
Yeah,
you
I mean,
know,
if you're going and wanting a Top Gun movie, you're getting exactly what you wanted. I mean, it succeeds in its mission.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Cool. All right. Well, those are our respective top 10 lists of 2022.
And John,
And
since I'm never going to talk about it on the podcast, I did enjoy Babylon, so there.
uh, why aren't you ever going to talk about it on the podcast?
Because it didn't do shit at the Academy Awards, and like it's kind of like past. I mean, like it just came out on DVD or like VOD, but we're not gonna talk
Oh,
about it.
well, if we
And
did like a Damien Chazelle episode or something like that,
okay, someday, but like
I don't know.
that it was a very polarizing movie, and I was on the fence that enjoyed it.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm just sort of like, oh, maybe I don't care that much, and now I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm sort of curious. Um, but okay, very good. Let's tell people where they can follow us so that they can share all of their happiness and sadness over our lists. Max, you're on Twitter at
MH Colville.
and the podcast is at It's the Pick Pod. You can also send us an email at itsthepictures@gmail.com with your thoughts on our lists or some of the news we talked about or anything else that's on here. Tell us what you thought about Babylon if you saw it. Probably didn't. You can follow us on Letterboxd. Just search for It's the Pictures and you can see lists of what we've been watching, including some of the movies on our lists, our top 10 lists. And you can check out the newsletter at itsapictures.substack.com. What have you been writing about lately, Max?
Like I said, I wrote about Sarah Polley because I'm doing an appearance on the Almost Major podcast, and I talked about one of the movies she appeared in The Weight of Water. And then what else did I talk about? I think I just did a recap. I think I talked briefly about Babylon and some work I've been doing, including an article on The Last of Us for Pace Magazine and a review of Poker Face, the TV show for Roger Ebert.
Very cool. And then finally, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or any other podcatching app. Just while you're there, please leave us 5 stars and a review. It'll help other people discover and enjoy the show. And Brian Skutle, tell us how people can check you out online.
Like I said, the website is www.sonic-cinema.com. It's my main place for movie reviews, blogs. You can see the podcast. I also am a composer, so you can hear some of my original music there. I've also got fan commentaries that we did a long time ago that you can hear there. I've also contributed to In Their Own League. I've also got patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. I'm on Letterboxd at my name, Brian, Brian Skutle, and Twitter I'm at Scuttle Lemur. And Sonic Cinema Podcast. I have a YouTube channel as well as basically any other podcast platform you can listen to from there.
Do you want to spell your Twitter handle?
Yeah. It is SKUTLELEMUR. There is a story behind it. It's a long one, but there's a story behind it. But I mean, honestly, pretty much everywhere you can, the main place you can find my links is Sonic Cinema. So
perfect, awesome. I actually do have to jump, as I mentioned. I don't think it'd be best if I carried on for what we've been watching, so I'm hoping, Max, you can just sort of take over from here and close us out. And I'll just say, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it as well. You gave me definitely some titles to consider for catching up on some of the not underseen necessarily, but lesser released movies of 2022.
All right, Brian. Yeah. So, what have you been watching lately?
Well, it's funny because of the fact that I do tend to watch a lot of older films. A lot of it is for the podcast, but some of it is I've got a series at Sonic Cinema called Repertory Reviews, where I typically look at older movies. Some of them I haven't seen before. Some of them I'm doing a review for the first time. Recently, what I really love there is Sam Peckinpah's the Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. That was a movie that I've been wanting to watch for a while, and it's one of the most unique looks at at the action formula. And it was from the 70s, and it is really brutal and funny and really surreal. As far as newer movies, there is a movie that's going to be coming out soon in Atlanta called Let Be Morning. It is from Israel. It was actually their submission for the 94th Academy Awards for Best International Film. And it's basically about a Palestinian family who went to their home village for the brother's wedding, and because Israeli forces have blocked the only road out of the village, uh, they're they have to stay there until the road is reopened. And it touches on themes and ideas that we consider as far as the lockdown, as far as traditional family tensions that come up, and basically what happens when when our lives are uh, basically put on hold. And it's really a fascinating movie. It is it's a bit of a slow burn, but by the time it gets to the end, it really compelled me quite a bit.
All right, so that's Let It Be Morning, and that's what, gonna have a limited run in Atlanta.
Well, it is currently in limited release in some of the bigger cities,
Okay.
but it's expanding to more big cities, and Atlanta is one of those. So,
All right, cool. For me, I caught up with the only Oscar Best Picture nominee that I hadn't seen yet, and come Oscar morning, and that was All Quiet on the Western Front. The movie has been getting a lot of traction, not only because maybe it was Netflix's best chance at awards and they really tried to push it, but then following the British Film Academy Awards, the BAFTAs, where it picked up a bevy of nominations. It continued to get nominated here in America for the Academy Awards, and it's a international foreign film, if you will. It's a German take on World War One, and from the German point of view, and um, it's kind of what you would expect. It's a war movie. It's funny, when I turned it on Netflix, it went straight for the English dub that I guess Netflix had commissioned, and I was like, I know that this is a foreign international film. I'm gonna put on the proper language. So if you're into subs and dubs and what have you, make sure to change the language on this one when you watch it on Netflix. And it follows a group of young men who seem pretty excited to get to war, and what it will mean for their lives and how cool they'll be and impress the ladies type deal. But when they actually get in the trenches, they realize what a big mistake they've made. And it's pretty unrelentingly gruesome throughout its runtime. And there is a general who believes that you should live and die on the battlefield, and he is, as much as the I guess the adversary in this movie than anything else, because he really sends it home that these guys just have to go out and fight in a war that they don't really have a chance of winning. And I don't know. I thought like the score, which has been praised, was really innovative. I because like it has like moments where like there's sound, and then like it just drops off the sound, and like the lack of sound is almost the score itself. I thought that was really an interesting take on the music for it, and um I think it was well acted, and it's very visceral. I think that I understand where the praise is coming from. I also don't think I ever want to watch it again.
yeah. No, I mean it's definitely one of those war movies where it's not necessarily one that I'm going to watch necessarily again. Come and See, the Russian film from the 80s, is another one of those movies that's just incredibly harrowing in how it presents war. But yeah, I mean, I know the 1931 or 1930 film was one of the early Best Picture winners. So, I mean, it's a very standard shape for war movies. And I mean, there are a lot of different variations on it, and this is a very good one. Like you, this was my last Best Picture nominee to catch up with, and no, it is from a technical standpoint, it's absolutely tremendous. In to a certain extent, I'll be disappointed if all it wins is Best International Film, which I'll be surprised if it doesn't win Best International Film, with the seeming lack of real contenders that anybody has ever heard of. I think if Decision to Leave had been in there, I think it would have been a different story. But no, it's a very good film, and I definitely understand the acclaim it's gotten.
Yeah, and I don't know where my mind is trying to go with this movie. Oh, that's the point I wanted to bring up. It's funny because how much John and I praise Top Gun and how that's such a pro military film and like makes combat seem like a good time. This is very much the total opposite spectrum of
Yeah.
the anti-war film.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, and it's it's funny because of the fact that, I mean, yeah, the Top Gun movies, both of them really are very uh patriotic, very jingoistic in terms of how they portray war, and they do see it as something that is as much of an adventure as anything. But at the same time, I do think one of the things that I think was really interesting about Maverick, and I mean, you kind of saw it in you kind of saw it in the first one too with the death of Goose, but especially I think in Maverick, you really got a sense of, even though none of the characters died in this one, I do feel like you do get a sense of life and death in this movie and what that does to somebody. And yeah, I mean, this is very much one of the definitive anti-war statements, and you can, again, you can see it as a template of so many different movies over the years.
All right, so that's what we've been watching. Brian, I know John has already given his thanks, but I'd like to thank you as well. It's been a pleasure to have you on, and enjoying your picks and your commentary on 2022. Thanks for appearing.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me on, and it was a pleasure to get to know both of you. And one of the things that I've really loved about getting to know more and more people online, and especially having conversations with them in a podcast form, is you kind of get a feeling of what people, depending on the types of movies that people resonate with, gives you a good idea as to who that person is. And I think that's one of the great values, I think, of movie podcasts, and that's one of the things I certainly go for. But and one of the things that appeals to me about talking with people like yourself and John about movies. So thank you very much for having me.
All righty, thank you. And you'll be hearing from us soon on It's the Pitchers podcast. We have another great episode with a returning guest coming up later this month. I'm looking forward to that. So, all right. Thank you. Bye.